webinar is such a reflective, contemplative space for us to engage with this question: what should or what education truly should be for? So to start with, I would like to ask each one of you to look back at your schooling and college learning journeys and think of what comes to the top of your mind. What are the feelings that get stirred when you look back? So pause, reflect, and could you put your responses in the chat box so all of us can see? It could be just a few words or a phrase or a statement. Okay, rewarding conformity, incomplete education, boring education, interesting. Carefreeness, okay. Fun with friends, something I would not want to go back to again. Wow. Liberation, punishment, discipline.
Some very interesting answers.
I know. Some have also gained from it. Pressure, forceful, competition. Okay, so lots of experimentation, lot of unused learning, all right. Okay, inferiority, lot. Okay, that's quite a few responses. Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing. It's good to clue in with the group because a webinar has its limitations. You don't get a feel of the group. It seems like you're just talking to a screen. So thank you for your responses, and we'll move on. So I'll begin with a story. Some of you may have probably heard it, but anyways. So this is this Mullah Nasruddin story, and it's the story of a day when Mullah heard that a falcon had come into the king's palace. So he rushed to take a look at this bird, and he felt amazed. He looked at this strange and weird bird, according to him, and his first response was, "My God, what a strange creature. Its beak is too big, its talons are too long, and its wings are too wide, too broad." So he says, I should set this bird right. So he goes about pruning the talons, cutting the beak, and clipping the wings. At the end of it, he feels very satisfied with his handiwork and says to himself, "Now you look like a good enough pigeon." This is a powerful story, and this illustrates how the standardized, uniform education system with which so many of us have had issues reduces individuals to less than what they are and makes them go through life thinking they're not good enough, and does not enable them then to bring forth their gifts to the world. Anindo?
Yes, thank you, Rama. So thanks for the story. Whether not good enough. So let's look at whether it's the people who are getting educated not good enough, or is there a space to question the system and say if the system itself is not good enough. Before we go in,
इसकी वजह से मैं मेरीगोल्ड की क्लास छोड़ी
before
recording.
I think it would be helpful if everybody mutes. And Adil, one housekeeping thing, there's a annotation, red line kind of thing on the screen. So if you just cancel that, that'll be nice. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so let's continue. So what we thought of doing was, before we go into discussing the future, emerging future, and how education system would be in that, let's take a bit of, take 2 steps back, look at our current education system and see what has worked and what hasn't, and who it has worked for. I don't think it will be an exaggeration to say that education today, mainstream education today, is pretty much a preparation for employment, and employment in the globalized economy of today. That's what it is. You and I have all been through this education system. It's basically today a finishing school for urban organized sector. Mind you, I'm not talking about the entire job sector. I'm talking urban organized sector, which serves just 8% of the total workforce in India. In terms of absolute number, that's 3 to 4 crores of people, like most of us, who have our provident fund, our gratuity, and our medicals taken care, and so-called secure job. The rest, 92%, and let's take a pause here and think of this number. This is 450 million, 45 crores, which is 1 in every 3 Indian, and 9 out of 10 Indian who have gone through an education system has ended up into the disorganized informal sector with 0 social security and 0 employment security. Who are these people? It's not just the migrant workers. We are talking about migrant workers quite a lot these days. It's them plus the waiters plus the domestic help who come to our house. All of those people put together. Right? In COVID times, we do not need to discuss what value they bring to our lives. And we also know the predicament that they are facing today. This is the sector, or these are the set of people who are literate mostly. Enrollment numbers are 99% plus in the primary schools, but by the time they enter 10th or 12th, 25 to 30% of the people drop out. And for the rest, they end up with an education which doesn't make them part of this 8%, and therefore they become part en masse of the large urban migrant workforce or unorganized sector workforce. These are the people for whom education has happened, but it has not worked. Obviously, if we have such a lopsided system, the subjects of monetizable value for the economy get all the attention and investment. And the moment there is investment, there's a question of return on investment. So that's where all the money and all the effort is going today. Think of it this way. Let's look at another sector, right? Our sports sector. I wouldn't say that we are not focused on our sports sector or there's no investment going in, but the fact is bulk of it is getting taken by cricket. And look what happens to sports like kabaddi and hockey. And think of what is happening to sectors or subjects in our education system that are not engineering, not technology, not science, not MBA. That's the lopsidedness of the current model that we have today. And it's important to understand what it does in our head at a personal level, our idea of success. Our idea of success gets defined and painted by the successful sectors which generate permanent employment. For some people, it works. For some others, it takes a lifetime to figure out or to differentiate, oh, hang on, wait a minute. This was not my idea of success. This was imposed on me. It's very important that we understand this difference. No discussion or session on education or Indian education is actually complete without taking name of this gentleman, Thomas Babington Macaulay. He's the person, and most of you must be knowing him. He's the person who's responsible for so-called our English medium education in India. Look at what he said back in 1835. He wanted to create a class of people who are Indian in blood and color, but English in everything else: taste, opinion, thinking, morals, beliefs, intellect. They were called Macaulay's children. In some sense, we are all Macaulay's children. And how beautifully successful Macaulay has been. If you look at the system today, to be fair to Macaulay, he was playing to his brief. He was doing what he was supposed to do. There was an industrial revolution happening, and he was creating a factory schooling system as input to that industrial revolution, and also creating administrative staff so that the British people could manage the Indians. Great. What baffles me is 180, 200 years later, we still continue to carry on with that legacy. And the fact is, it has fit beautifully well into the system because there was industrial revolution, and now that has got replaced with globalization. So from political imperialism to economic imperialism, and Macaulay's system of education is catering to that. As a result, deep in our psyche, we Indians, or most of us, tend to slightly undervalue our Indianness and really hanker to whatever is Western, whiter is better, more refined, imported, modern. Come to today's globalized economic system, show me the money, and very importantly, what's in it for me, right? This whole angle of what's in it for me actually today dictates our consumption choice, our choice of how we engage with the society at large. And we are going to talk a lot more about that in the coming slides. So that's Macaulayan education system for us. This is something very important, what it has done beyond, shaping these
Can we people switch on?
What it has done to our internal self. And this is something we discuss a lot at Bhoomi, which is taking back the agency. By agency, what we mean, or what I mean here, is really our ability to use our own thinking and feeling to take our own decisions, not really rely on the expert, which is always outside. In education system, we say, oh, teacher knows best. Later on in adult life, it's experts knows best, specialists, leaders, Google. In the whole process, the I becomes passive and very gullible. It's so easy. And I was into consumer behavior and marketing through my life. It was so easy to manipulate or to sell to a mind or to a consumer who already thinks that West is better. I came across this very interesting quote from Anthony J, who was one of the British playwrights and writers. Uncreative mind can spot wrong answers. We are very good at spotting wrong answers, but it takes a hugely creative mind to spot a wrong question. Spotting a wrong question. One of my favorite scenes from the film Three Idiot, which I'm sure most of you have seen, is this funny interaction between Viru Sahasrabuddhe, the professor and the head of the institute, and Rancho, which is our protagonist, Amir Khan. So Virus says, here is the pen. This pen is the epitome, the pinnacle of technological advancement, because this pen can write in outer space. Rancho puts out his hand and said, but why did you have to put so much effort on that? Outer space में pen का जरूरत क्या है? pencil selectively. So imagine the ingenuity, imagine the impact that it has when you question the question. How many of us did really question the question? We are too busy finding the right answers. Last but not the least, this whole idea of homogenization, standardization, and creating monoculture. Look, India is a diverse country. We know that it's almost become so common to say that it doesn't have an impact anymore. But the truth is, our current education system is so standardized that it's disconnected from nature, bioregion, and local livelihoods. The syllabus that somebody in Sarjapur in Bangalore is studying is pretty much the same which is being studied at a remote village in a district in Madhya Pradesh. How do we expect that to work? No wonder, therefore, that there is huge dropout rates that's happening between 10th and 12th. And if we study the dropout rates, we will see that the highest dropout rates are in rural areas, not urban. In Bimaru state, which is Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. And within those states, in the tribal areas, where we have the worst record of attendance and dropouts. Our government today is looking at literacy and is looking at enrollment. Enrollment numbers, I was looking at the HRD ministry site, and enrollment numbers are like in 90s. But nobody is looking at the fact that this education is not working for them. If you look at number one reason for dropout, it's lack of interest. Almost 100 years back, Rabindranath Tagore said, we dropped the child of his earth to teach him geography. We are continuing that same legacy today. And why only talk of disconnections or lack of diversity in our rural-urban setup? What about at a personal level, diversity of mind? Even if we remove diversity of space from the equation, within the same space, the diversity of minds, interest, and learning styles are being ignored. Some of us are good at reading, looking at the slides and learning. Others learn by listening. Some others learn visually. Some learn by doing. Some learn by dancing or singing, right? But our current education system is not going to reward them. In fact, they will be branded as failures. I'll give you a personal example. I have a daughter who's less than 3-year-old. She is in a pre-prep school. And they're trying to teach her ABCD and 1, 2, 3, 4 through books, and now even worse through Zoom calls, right? It is impossible to make her sit. Within 1 minute, she's dropping out or disengaging from it, literally walking out. So one of these days, we literally walked out and I took her outside because she was saying, I want to go outside and play. We were in the parking lot, and she suddenly looks at the car parked there and the number plate and starts identifying, saying, this is 8, this is 1, this is 7, this is 3. We kept on playing that game for the next 1 hour with her choosing which car she likes based on colors and then reading the numbers. And we were learning numbers. I was asking her to come back, she would not. So that's what happens when learning comes inside out, but we completely ignore that system. The result is actually quite serious. What happens is if we create such disenchantment and disengagement through our education system, and if we take people en masse and put them through a eye of the needle of employment, they do get employed, those 8%, maybe the others as well, but that employment or that adult life creates stress, insecurity, lack of purpose, and all the things that you can see here in the inner circle, right? You feel bored and stuck. I can talk about myself. Maybe this is, right time to share a bit of my story. So I grew up in a, a traditional system, traditional education system. It just happened that I was good at Bengali, history, and maths. Obviously, Bengali and history doesn't have any ROI. So the natural default choice was focusing on maths, and then engineering happened, and then MBA happened, and then working in multinationals and corporate world happened. While I was successful in an external sense, internally, something was feeling like a void. In fact, the order of the day is to work hard and get promotion. I was working very hard to get promoted, which should have been a red flag. I shouldn't have been working so hard to get promoted if this was my thing. And even after those promotions were coming, I was not feeling good. I was still feeling the sense of void. I thought of doing weekend charity, right? Let's plant some trees. Let's try to reduce our carbon footprint. Did not work. Till the time I really looked at the source of my feeling and figured out it's my idea of success, which is emerging post 40, is actually at odds with the idea of success with which I grew up. As a result, I had to exit the matrix and I had to come into this sector in order to really make sense of what's going on. And what happens is, if the 8% people who are getting into the so-called good jobs and running the economy, there's a percentage of people who, like me, and that's a huge percentage, I would argue, feeling disenchanted. That results in sort of compensatory consumption, if you will, and excess, buying lots of things, taking holiday because I'm earning so much money. What do I do with it? Unwholesome food choices, having imported stuff, and look what it does to the outer circle. It results in a high carbon footprint lifestyle. The top 10% today in India are having 49% of entire carbon footprint, right? If you go to top 1%, that will be probably 40% of entire carbon footprint. That is what is resulting in the inequality. Because of this economic inequality that is existing, you have this rural to urban migration, you have jobless growth, you have urban sprawl, you have rising injustice, import orientation, and obviously environmental degradation. So what happens with self, where there has been a disconnection thanks to education, actually radiates into the social and ecological impact. Like they say, if you're burning inside, you burn the world as well, right? So that is what is going on today with a lot of people, I would argue. Yes, definitely for some, for a good percentage, it has worked out, maybe a subset of that 8%, but what about the others? Now, the question is, why do we still carry on? I would argue it is a big part of it is by design, because our mainstream education doesn't really exist in a vacuum. It exists as a cog in the larger wheel of what I call the wheel of so-called progress. At the top, we have the globalized economy, which needs mainstream employment, which therefore needs mainstream education. Those employment and education are happening in the urban setups. So you have this rapid urbanization. Then you have people who needs to support that economy, and those top 5%. So you have rural to urban migration. With so many people coming in, so much money chasing so few people, you have consumption. In order to drive consumption, there is advertising. And if they're successful, there's GDP growth, which, by the way, is the top marker for globalized economy. So a lot of it is really happening by design. However, as you can imagine, this is 50% of the story. We are not going to just say that, let's give the agency to outside, say, it's a system problem. I don't have anything to do with it. Do we also have anything to do with it? Is it also by habit? This is where I would invite back our storyteller, Rama, to tell you a very interesting story about a cat. Rama?
Thank you, Anando. Um, so to expand on this, what Anando has brought about, I have another story. So this story is about a guru who lived in his ashram with his disciples and a pet cat whom he was very fond of. Now the cat created problems whenever the guru went in to do his prayers, meditation, or rituals. The cat would disrupt everything. So the disciples got into this practice of tying up the cat before the guru went in for his prayers. It so happened that after a couple of years, the cat passed on. The disciples quickly went about and got another cat because the cat had to be tied before the guru started his prayers. Some more time went on, and the guru himself passed on, and one of his disciples stepped in. But the practice of tying up the cat before the prayers did not discontinue. It became an almost integral and important ritual of this particular ashram. There were discussions on it, discourses held, but nobody bothered to ask this question, why was a cat tied up in the first place? And that's pretty much where we are at. We have not stopped to ask those fundamental questions that Anando has been raising in his presentation so far. Today we have hit a pause button. We've been made to take a pause and ask ourselves a lot of questions. At this point in time, I would like all of you to take a pause again and reflect on, in these times of the forced lockdown, what have been some of the guru's cat that you have questioned for yourself. Now, this is a reflection exercise, so you don't have to put it down in the chat box, but maybe you can just jot down on a paper or your phone or whatever. We'll just give ourselves some time to do that. What are some of the guru's cat that I have questioned for myself, for ourselves? Okay. Personally, what I have questioned for myself is the definition of normal, what we have looked at as normal. And I came across a quote which really resonated with me, which spoke about that a normal which normalized such inequities, so much extraction and depletion and disconnection from nature, is it really normal? That really resonated with me. And the quote went on to say that this is also an opportunity for all of us to stitch a new fabric, um, which can be, which can encompass all of humanity, as well as which will be in connect with nature. So, what should be the mantras to build in resilience? There has been a lot of talk uh, around building immunity, especially in the wake of this pandemic. But a lot of people have been talking about this, but it hasn't got that kind of attention that it is getting now. That building immunity, taking agency for self-care and your own health in your own hands is far better than depending on an external um, miraculous drug or vaccine or health system to cure you. Investing in communities, that which will help you anchor yourself, draw support from, and fall back on, is something which is extremely important to build resilience. growing some of our own food. I don't think I need to elaborate on this. This is pretty much self-explanatory. These times have made us all realize that one of our preoccupations and concerns have been to get access to safe food. So growing some of our own food, connecting to land, that which will help us ground ourselves in times of uncertainty and anxiety. It will help us anchor ourselves deeply. And of course, rethinking consumption choices to really look at what is essential to move towards the direction of minimalism. So these are some seed thoughts that we can look at if we need to build resilience um, in our systems for a better future. Shall we move to the next slide? Okay. So we need to rethink what we learn and how we learn, because if we need to have a system which is not only tailored to that skewed employment, which is not really making sense to most people, and we need to look at an education system which prepares us for moving away from the industrial age to a more ecological age, to a more ecologically sensitive age, then we need to reconsider a lot of things. We've put down a few pointers here. So along with learning about the world outside, all the data, information, content that we grapple with, our intellectual selves that we keep fostering, we do need to learn about our own selves. We need to cater to the well-being for ourselves. That needs to be given primacy. Our emotive well-being, our psychic, intuitive selves need to be fostered, because all of this then enables us to ask those questions that we need to ask, build our convictions, and make meaningful choices for ourselves. Of course, physical well-being, like I mentioned before, taking agency for our own health, taking care of our physical selves so that we are not dependent on external systems all the time. Such learning will also lead to a rote learning, focus on content alone, to moving towards a learning journey which is focused on search and unfolding, which gives space for each individual to explore what really fires them, to understand what is it that makes sense to them, and take their learning journey forward, so that you learn for the sake of learning and not just making your grades or doing well in those exams. We also need to question the dominant paradigm. Onindo has elaborated on that, so I will not go into that. We need to question notions of success, notions of a so-called good life that we have been given, so that we can really look at root level issues and not just be content and satisfied with end of the branch solutions or cosmetic changes. We need to have a system which decentralizes education, so as to include the large majority of our population which have been marginalized and sidelined. Of course, this is a policy level change we are talking about, but this needs to be really looked at, because this is an issue of right to livelihood. This is an issue of right to dignity. When you have people who are able to live sustainably in their own bioregions, lead a life which is which gives them enough livelihood opportunities, then you will not have problems like the one we are grappling with right now, of displacement, of migration, of difficulties that people are facing. Also, we need to have a more place-based centered education system, so that there is space for local knowledge systems, for practices and ways of life that people have over hundreds of years developed. So here I'd like to give an example of an article we published in our Bhoomi magazine a couple of issues ago, in which Aarti Rao, the writer, photographer, filmmaker, had written about this very interesting agricultural practice that happens in the desert region of Rajasthan. Now that's a system that's so specific to that bioregion. The children there, adults there need to know about that, because that helps them learn about how to survive, how to flourish in that bioregion. This needs to be included and incorporated, because it also gives us a pride in our own skin, in our own knowledge systems, and help us not be manipulated, like Anando mentioned earlier. It helps us move away from being colonized so totally. We need to move away. The content needs to shift focus from a very narrow human-centeredness to a larger eco-centeredness, because this then will help us move away from the reductionist thinking that is fostered in the conventional education system, and helps us to have deep respect for complexity that nature is, the self-regulating animate organism that earth is, and respect its regenerative processes. And it also then helps us you know, to be aware of the limitations of our own understanding, of our own knowledge, and deeply revere earth and the miracle that life is. Knowledge about food, knowledge about food choices, knowledge about safe food is also extremely critical, because that's one way we can be good to ourselves, take care of our own health, as well as be good to the earth. And this is another significant area where we can really look at consumption, because if you move away from processed food, there's a lot we can work with consumerism and the consumption choices that we are making. So this is another critical aspect. So if you don't take care of your physical well-being, how do you take care of anything else? And how do we learn? So what we learn is important, but how we learn is also important. The conventional education system puts us in the boxes of same age classes. And this is so unnatural, because for centuries, human beings have learned in intergenerational communities. And when you have the opportunity for many to many learning, perspectives are built, questions are raised, knowledge and understanding is deepened. And it's not just about the expert handing us something and us absorbing things passively. It's an active engagement. We, of course, need to rethink exams, grade ranking. That I don't need to elaborate on that. Sitting in circles. So it may seem like a very simple practice, but when you sit in a circle and engage with each other, you experience interdependence. You tune in with processes of collaboration. You acknowledge and honor the presence of each other. Also, curriculum content is important, but there needs to be the education for future needs to look at a dynamic curriculum where there is spaces for experiential hands-on learning and open-ended learning, where things can change and evolve and discoveries can happen as you're learning. And it's not a static learning to reproduce for the exams alone. The real life projects that we do in Bhoomi and many other learning spaces is a very nice tool to explore this, because you're learning holistically. How we learn also has to design in spaces for diverse learners. People learn differently, you have different learning styles, multiple intelligence theory is one place to look at. Also to know that if you really want to honor the falcons and the pigeons and the wagtails and the magpies, there has to be space for diverse learning engagements. I'd like to share a small anecdote here. So one of our fellows from this current batch, the illustrations we have used for this presentation has been done by her. When she started her book review, her opening statement was, I am a non-reader and it has been hard for me to take a book to do a book review. She chose the One Straw Revolution because farming is close to her heart. And then she said, as she read the book, she started drawing because she's an artist and she's a designer. So that comes naturally to her. And then she decided to do her book review using her illustrations. What an amazing book review that was. It touched all of us. And she ended her presentation by saying that I have discovered my style of reading. So when you have a design which is built in like that, you give space for everyone to work with what stimulates them and what makes sense to them. And of course, nothing can compensate real experience of being in touch with our animate earth, where we can drink in all the information through all our senses to realize and appreciate the miracle that this planet that we call our home is. So yeah, so I'd like to end our presentation here, and we'll open it up to some perspective sharing from some of our fellows, Bhoomi fellows from this batch. So I'd like to invite Pooja, Tejaswini, and Seema to begin. You can take turns, one at a time.
Thank you. Thank you, Rama. I think that was really nice. And a lot of what you said made perfect sense. Before I start, I'd like to probably just introduce myself and say that I just completed my Bhoomi Fellowship in Holistic Education last year. This year, rather. I resonate with what Rama was talking about the Guru's cat story. When I started off, my Guru's cat was my idea of success or my idea of happiness. We've all come from this education system where we have been told that success comes under a certain set of things. You achieve success when you finish your education, when you get a job, that is respectable as per society, when you get a job that pays you a lot, when you get a job that gives you a lot of materialistic comforts. And so I walked that path. I walked the path that people told me was my path. I did my engineering, I joined a corporate sector, I joined a well-respected MNC company, and I worked for many years. And I didn't stop to question for quite some time whether this idea, this notion of happiness, of success is mine. I just took it as mine because that's what everyone was doing at that time. And I walked that path for many years and realized at some point of time that it wasn't my path at all. I was achieving success. I was a good engineer. I was good at studies. I was getting a decent pay package. By all definitions of society, I should have been extremely happy. But I didn't get that sense of success and achievement within me. And at some point of time, finally, I decided to question my Guru's cat. I questioned this notion of happiness and said, I will find my own happiness and quit my job. And having quit it, I had a sense of weightlessness, of freedom, which allowed me to then start looking for what makes me happy. Uh, for the next 2 years, I helped run a small school in the Himalayas, and it brought me so much of contentment. It didn't fall under anyone's category of what I should be doing. You know, after having so many years of work in corporate, after having built yourself to a certain level, uh, I didn't fit in the society's norm. But what it brought me was tremendous happiness. And that's when I started thinking about uh, why does our education system not honor the whys? Why are we doing this? Why is this way? Could there be a second? Could there be another side to it? Is there a second narrative that we're not looking at? A lot of these questions got answered once I decided to use the road less traveled per se, uh, road which not many people had taken. I decided to take it and walk on that path, and that's what gave me a lot of happiness. And then being in Bhoomi last year, I think just reiterated the whole thing. When you find these co-travelers who are also following a similar path to yourself, sort of reiterates your belief in yourself in the path that you have chosen. So for me, I think that's what really resonated with me. Rama's story of the Guru's cat and how it is my own journey right now. So yeah, I think I would like to end it at that point there. If
Thank you,
anyone else,
Pooja.
Steshni or Seema. Yeah, thank you, Rama.
I think we have other fellows waiting, right? One
Yeah,
of them can go next. Yeah.
Yeah, Teshwini.
yeah. Namaskara, everyone. So I'm Teshwari, and I would like to say that I just completed my fellowship in holistic education this April from Bhoomi. So, where I would like to start it where did my journey began. Actually, after graduation, I think I was more in conflict with myself and the world around me that nothing made sense to me. So what was happening is I was really looking at the world and myself with a fixed set of framework that was handed over to me by the current education system that I went through all those years. So later when I had the chance of having or experiencing the alternative education, I really was able to discover diverse set of frames through which I could look at the world and through which I could look at myself and my relationship with the world. So I would like to state a few examples. The first one being the strengths theory by Clifton. So where he mentions 34 different strengths. So it's very, when you look at your marks card, it's A plus B, but they do not really tell what your strengths are. And when you ask a person what your strengths are, they're really like dumbfolded. They cannot answer it. So going through this model really helped me reiterate my strength, own it, and also look at other strengths and accommodate them as well. So further, also when I was in school, I was really upset when I was not included in the set of students that were called so called intelligent. But then when I had the chance to be in Bhumi, I really question what intelligence really means. Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence actually recognizes not just one, but 8 different types of intelligences. So through which I really realized that I'm an intrapersonal, person. I'm high in intrapersonal intelligence, which means I really like to learn things by, taking some time to reflect on them or introspect on them, joining the concepts to my life and see how I can improve my life with those concepts. But being in the conventional education system, I never had that chance or that time to reflect or introspect, because all the time we were trying to be faster and quicker at studying something that did not even relate to my life. So I think really discovering these tools like multiple intelligences and also knowing that there's not just one but other multiple intelligences also in me helps me also believe that I am also worth it. So further also, there are these, as Rama mentioned, about the book reading sessions. I really thoroughly enjoyed them because that is my learning style. I really like to read and write, and that is how I learn things very easily. So it became very easy for me to understand various subjects through reading and writing. And also there were so many in between journaling breaks that were given to us that helped me reflect and introspect on my learning and adopt them to my own life with the help of the hands-on and real life projects that were given to us. And further also, since I'm a person who thinks in visuals, if Rama tells me a story, like if she tells that the guru's cat, about the guru's cat, then in my head immediately I start imagining guru's cat in, like it was a black cat or a white cat or a orange cat. So that is how my mind processes the information that is being provided. So also the modules that facilitated this, videos that were shown to us, and the freedom given to express our learnings in these formats also helped me really feel very confident in myself and also confident with the world around me. So I would say that it's very important for the diverse generation today to really engage themselves in diverse ways of learning. So as somebody who has struggled with current education system, I would wish that the future education for us and for everybody else or the coming generation really acknowledges these diversities in learning styles, teachings, evaluation, so that we all feel a sense of collaboration rather than just giving each one to compete to certain benchmarks and trying to put them in these little boxes that we think are the best. So
Yeah, I think we lost Tejaswini right at the end, but I think we got the gist of it. I think we have one more fellow waiting.
Seema, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yeah? Okay. Okay. So, hi, I'm Seema, and I was also a last year fellow. I finished my holistic education in this year, 2019-20. So for me, I think my journey started as at Bhoomi they call me like the YY girl. I think I've been a YY girl throughout my life a lot, and I think like for me my question started very early. Like I was questioning my schooling, my college, and I was a very experiential learner. So I was like I studied management degree, but I was learning a lot outside the college, and those were the questions that started for me. And long story short, like after that, I think like past 5 years I was engaged in education space, was working for underprivileged communities and children. And last 2 years I spent in a rural school in a district in Telangana. And but I think like in the entire process, I still felt that those questions were still alive, because again for the underprivileged children, the story was the same. Let's focus on numeracy, literacy. It just became the same old story. So then I joined the Bhoomi course for the holistic education program. And this last year, I think something that came out very strongly for me from the course was, how can I start with myself? Yes, there is a lot of issues outside, there's a lot of things happening, but can I start with agency, which Anindo also spoke about? Where is my agency? And if I talk about self, so I have been practicing and purposely practicing connecting with my food, my body, and my basic needs. So for example, like so we had a session on reading labels at Bhoomi. So more than ever, like earlier also I was reading labels, but whenever I'm buying any plastics or any cosmetics or anything, I've become more invested in just reading what I'm buying, and reading the ingredients. And also also like seeing, why don't I have the capacity, why does someone outside can make my tooth powder or toothpaste, why can't I do that, so just investing in my own capacity to do that. Like I really value the cyclicity in nature. So in this lockdown, I really wanted to work with hope. So I started composting, doing microgreens. So how can I believe that I have the power to work with my body, my needs, and how can I have my agency back from, having from agency in a packaged food and having more trust there? Can I put that trust back, starting for self? So I think like for self, this was me trying to get my agency back. When it comes to, I think, relationships, so I come from a little difficult background, and I felt like constantly there was a tussle with me and my family, whereas I was trying to do different things and they were at a different space. So agency in my with my family for me meant, how can I hold gentle spaces for them and for myself also, not just get carried away for by holding spaces for them. So how I do that for myself is by engaging with like-minded people in communities, be it with Bhoomi Fellows, be it with I'm part of some zero waste groups. I'm engaging with like an active Teach for India community. So the idea is things that interest me, and the things that I value, and I know there's a like-minded community outside. So why can't I use that agency and I connect to those people and those communities, and invest in those spaces? And thirdly, I think the one question that was still dangling for me was about work, because after Bhoomi, I was also thinking, should I go back to the education sector? So that question was very alive, and it's still alive. But I think one thing that I really valued, and as Teshwani was also speaking about it, like everything that we did at Bhoomi uh, was was not like thrown like with data, with numbers. It was a very experiential, it was a very process based experience. Like if we are doing complexity theory also, that's done in a way that people with multiple intelligence can understand. So one thing that I strongly picked from Bhoomi was the process work, like the process. How can I move away, not just reduce things to object in the sense, okay, well, outcomes and objects, but also look at the process that has gone, that we have gone through to reach there. So that's something that has really stayed with me. So now I whatever work I wish to take up, I wish to uh, even in education, I wish to engage in processes rather than just getting bogged down. Sometimes their parents, their different stakeholders, not just getting bogged down by outcomes, but also letting children enjoy the process, letting them come alive through the process. So I think that has played a very strong role in agency for me. uh, this is what I wish to share, and thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you, all of you, for your deep sharing as always. Shall we move to the next slide? So if you wish to explore further, we have just listed a few books, some videos, films, And Bhoomi magazine, you can find this on our bhoomimagazine.org archive. We also have some hard copies. These 3 issues were dedicated to education. This is our education series, so you could take a look at any of this. Yeah, there are 4. We have put 3 of them here.
Yes, and we will share this presentation that will have, we'll add the link for these magazines, but in general on our Bhoomi website, Eternal Bhoomi magazine website, there is archive where you can find all of them. Rama, I was thinking in interest of time, should we open up for questions and
Yes.
then look at the video?
Yeah, I think so too. And one writer, so the questions, any of us can answer it. It's not only some of us who have the agency to answer. So then it becomes a more co-held space. So, and the questions that are raised, I think any of us can, is that fine, Adil? Then how do we manage that?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and
let's have an open discussion. I think.
Yeah,
like
we'll have a co-sharing
discussion.
and a co-sensing, because I think I feel education really
right.
A lot of people have strong
Correct.
Emotional
So we can open it up. Whoever feels charged can respond. So shall we open up for questions?
Yeah. So we can open up for sharing. Anyone who wants to ask a question or share something can just unmute themselves and share and then mute themselves, or even use the chat box.
Adil, we are getting some contact email IDs and so on to share presentations. So
yeah, I'm making a note of that.
Achha.
So that So yeah, the floor is open for questions. Anybody who wants to ask a question can unmute themselves.
Hello, this is Nuzat here.
Hi Nuzat, go ahead.
Yeah, working in a private setup, bringing down these kind of ideas to a rural setup is pretty easier in many ways, because but when you're coming to private organizations who have a clear mindset, they're not really understanding the future of it. They're more into the economics of it. So how can we really approach them and push these ideas across?
Anindo, maybe you would have an answer for that, or anyone from
yeah.
So if I maybe I'll take a shot at it, based on my understanding. So if I've understood your question, how do we bring in these changes or these kind of change in thinking in a private setup, which is looking at a return on investment kind of a paradigm? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what.
Okay, I would say 2 things. First of all, like we said, our core philosophy is you can't really teach or make people learn. You let it come from within. But what we could do in any situation, even with that audience, is bring in videos, movies, articles, and show them so that it triggers something, right? I mean, this presentation might not trigger it for a particular person, but a video might, right? Or an article might, or a quote might. So I think it's important to bring that buffet of things which are out there on alternative education, so that something sticks. That's I think one way of looking at it. And secondly, coming to the economics, I think increasingly we are seeing diversity in type of jobs that are coming in, and that's it's too early, probably too little, but we do see a secular movement towards engineering and MBA and medical or that kind of vocational education not being only option. And even within those vocational education, there are multiple reports which say that only 5 or 10% of the engineers are employable. So I think if we bring in these data, these numbers to say that another way of looking at things is possible, that's a good start. That's my 2 cents. I would urge others to share.
So there's a question here I see. What changes can we bring in our current education system? Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of questions are coming in.
Yeah,
I think basically, if you can sum up the 2 questions, it's like, what is the alternative to the factory school model that we have right now?
So again, I'd like to say that again, if we go back to models, then again, it's the same, again, the old paradigm. So one of the things that we'd like to state is that instead of looking at models, can we start with beliefs? So there are enough, I mean, maybe not enough, there are many examples of how people have taken onus and from their beliefs started initiatives which have questioned the conventional education system. One example that comes to my mind is a school near Sirsi, which a person called Dr. Balachandra Hegde has helped initiate. So this is a regular government school, but he, along with the community that lives there, have invested their time and energy in the school and have really made this alternative education accessible, keeping a lot of those elements that we talked about in the beginning. So things are possible, but again, if we look at a what do you call centralized agency to take charge, I don't know if that's the way. So I'd like to say that, can we go from belief to action rather than from model to action is my take on it. Anyone else wishes to respond?
Okay, so I guess we can move on to the next question if there are no other responses. I think Nidhi has a question. What changes are needed in our education system, given that pandemics like COVID-19 are a reality and will be a reality in the near future? And if physical distancing will be required in educational spaces, then how will we provide holistic education?
Does anyone want to take a shot at that? Anyone from the group? Any of the Bhoomi fellows or others? Guess. I think Bindu has raised her hand.
Yeah, I think she can go ahead and. Yeah. Bindu, are you there?
Yeah.
This is Rajni.
Hey, Rajni.
Rajni, do you want to go?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes, now.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the COVID-19 and the emerging reality of physical distancing, although it is quite prevalent right now, but I think if we are looking for a long-term solution, although physical distancing is a short-term solution, but what is a long-term solution for these kind of problems is not just by physical distancing, but also by working on our immunities. I think in the allopathic medical system or the current pop a pill kind of a trend. There is a solution for everything in our medicinal world. And rather than popping a pill for every problem that we have, how do we look at strengthening our immunity? And yeah, I think that's one of the long-term solutions that I would like to look at. Yeah, I think that's what I would like to share.
I think Yashila had a question about models, I think, which Ramayan, you kind of answered about looking at beliefs rather than models, because I think Yashila's question was, how do we take this alternative schooling to a large scale and make it more accessible
Yeah,
in a
I
way
kind of
that it,
answered that.
yeah. So I think, so we're good with that. Ashwini had a question that large pockets of rural India, the quality of education in those areas is really going down, and there is a shift towards privatization of education. So I think her question is, how will we deal with it, and how will we kind of reach out to children who are unable to probably connect online or don't have access to uh, many forms of learning, new forms of learning. And so I think she probably has this. Ashwini, would you like to uh, rephrase the question yourself or ask the question yourself? You can unmute yourself and do that.
Hi, Adin. Am audible?
Yes. Go ahead, Ashwini.
Yeah. Actually, I just wanted to ask. There are a lot of rural pockets where the quality of education is going uh, down day to day, and the people are shifting to the private school, and uh, and it becomes the trends in particular the rural pockets in Odisha. Uh, as well as my second question is the after the COVID situation, most of the people who are not able to connect through online, and here the government and the administration is trying to connect the people, or the learning process is going by online. So, uh, how there is any alternative to reach out the student through any other form, or continuing their learning process? I just wanted to know about it.
Thank you, Ashwini, for the question.
So I think Ashwini, what you're raising, the first part of your question, um, is what we talked about. That this, what you're raising, is a really relevant question, and we need to look at it from a policy level change, or a lot of people who are driven by it, they, from their belief system, they work and engage with rural communities. So it's not as if we have all the solutions right here. We are just stirring thought, reflection, and discussion, and then people in different parts would have to look at it, and also policy level changes will have to be brought in so that place-based education becomes relevant, so that um, in rural areas, education that's relevant to that space is given primacy. So that's my response. The other question you've raised is, um, to me, this whole COVID situation is also, if you look at the larger scheme of things, it's a shorter time frame, and connecting through internet and carrying on classes is the stopgap for now. It does not really compensate for real engagements and real connections. So um, I would like to say that this is something we are doing for now, and therefore, I don't know, maybe instead of just engaging in information exchange, uh, just letting the children be and experience life could also be one deep way of engaging, because it's not only about information, right?
Also, maybe just to add, one comment in response to your first question. Um, from where I stand, I don't see, private schools necessarily being an evil or a negative thing just by dint of being private, right? So there are government schools, there are private schools, there are non-profit type of schools, there are also private schools which are looking at alternative education. So if there are, and we talked about decentralization, right? So at a local level, if there are non-profits or NGOs or even for-profit alternative schools that are coming up, that are really challenging the age-old curriculum of a government school, or way of doing things of a government school, and starting a movement bottom up, that's what is happening in many other fields, and to me that's also good enough, and that's really a good thing. It is indeed happening, and Rama and Farah would have many more examples of grassroots schools which are working in remote places and really bringing in this alternative open education model. So I don't necessarily see it as a negative trend. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, you're right.
Can I also add in?
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Sure,
so
Seema, go ahead.
Ashwini, just one more thing. I feel like I resonate a lot with what Rama has shared, in the sense that I feel like especially the rural communities and in urban areas also, like the slum communities, I think their challenges are much more larger in terms of the mental health and the social distancing and the physical health of children, because they might be grappling with a large number of issues compared to people in upper middle class or middle class families. And also, like, another question of screen time, how much screen time is appropriate for children, and also, like, children dealing with so much right now, does it even make sense to throw more information to them, as what Rama was sharing? So I feel, so this was mentioned by Pratham Rukmani from Pratham, that maybe this year is more about living in the present, and,
Yeah.
maybe revising the concepts that children have learned, and starting strong the next year. Anyways, we are, as humanity only, we are dealing with something large enough, and, maybe we can cut some slack to our children. They, like, there has to be context to learning as well. So if you just look at that, I think slowing down does make a lot of sense at this time. Yeah. Okay.
And this is a good time. Adil,
Go ahead, Rama.
I'm still on. And this is a good time to learn a lot of life skills. How are we thinking that? So a friend of ours, their son is learning to cook a few things. He's learned to build his own little space on a tree where he can sit and read his book. So it's possible to learn an instrument maybe, or some songs. So we can cut slack, like Seema said, and they can revise concepts and they can engage in some real life learning. That would be so much more meaningful.
I think we have a couple more questions coming up. What support can be provided to those who resonate with the holistic idea of education, yet have very little experience around the planning and execution of it? And this is coming from Asim. Hope it's not Asim Srivastava.
I'm sure it's not.
There are a couple of more questions also, Adil. Maybe, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll quickly look into that. I think Tejaswini had a question on designing of curriculum. How do you do that based on the local knowledge system? And what is the geographical boundary that one must consider while doing so? Hmm.
And there's a question from Manjusha as well. Yeah, but I think we'll take one by one now. The time is also limited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the first one was before the bioregion thing. What was the first one?
So we'll start with Tejaswini's one. How, like, I think she was talking about how do you design a curriculum? What are the things that you keep in mind before you design a curriculum based on local knowledge system?
So this is not easy to answer in 2 minutes or something.
Yeah,
And there is
exactly.
certainly no blueprint that one can follow. But again, if a group of people, I mean, I'm coming from our experience of having done it with Prakriya, that we said, okay, we are in this bioregion, and how do, so it can be different things. It can be nature walks around the area. It can be interactions with local communities around. It can be learning the songs that are sung here during harvest. It could be celebrating some of the festivals, making food. I mean, it can be talking in that language, giving primacy to it. So there are, while we are saying bioregion, it's not about drawing an exact thing and then saying, but how do we organically play with it and keep a few pointers and work with it, and things evolve and emerge. That's how it has been in our experience. So, and it may not be a perfect, uh, you know, what do you call play space, but it helps that you just engage with this physical space, engage with the cultural space of that place, and things will happen. Somebody in the group will know something, and then it adds on. That's my quick response, but this is a question that um, needs further elaboration. What was the other question?
The other question was from Asim. What support can be provided to those who resonate with the holistic idea of education yet have very little experience in planning and execution? I think then just opening yourself up to spaces that work with holistic education would be one way to go about it.
Yeah.
Right? So there are many across the country. You can just search for them, and if you are personally interested in it, then reach out to them and hopefully uh, work with them and get the experience required in planning and execution. I think that would be learning by doing would be the only way out of
Yeah.
that, looks like.
And also linking up with people who are already engaged in such a journey, then they may give you further pointers. So that's one way.
Right. I think questions are coming thick and fast. We may not be able to answer all of them, but we'll definitely try. I think there was a question on how, from Francis Clinton, on the role of spirituality and how it could be included in children's education. Um, uh, from Bhumi's angle, it would be more about reverence of nature and the spirituality of nature. So I think maybe Rama, you could quickly talk about it.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right, Adil. So from Bhumi's point of view, the way we have taken is uh, eco-spirituality. So how do we revere life? How do we revere earth that supports all of us? How do we also honor and respect each other? Because each one of us, uh, is a spiritual being as well. And again, spirituality not in terms of the moral science, because that again becomes an imposition and static, because it gives people a lot of do's and don'ts, and it doesn't evoke and inspire anything. So to me, it is how do we allow each person to discover that and hold spaces for that. A quick answer.
Anindra, would you like to chime in quickly before we go to the next question, or should
No,
we?
I think Rama covered it, and from a personal experiential standpoint, I think during my days of sustainability education at Bhoomi, nature meditation is where I really got in touch with my spirituality and made those connections. So, yep.
Okay, I think we have one question from Badi. How will COVID push help this reverse migration that we are kind of seeing now? And how can people in rural areas become protagonists of sustainability? And how can Bhoomi catalyze this process even in a small matrix? I think the second one we'll need to sit down, second part we'll need to sit down and think about it. But
Yeah, and so my response to that is it's already happening organically. I mean, nobody is asking people to shift from rural to or urban to rural. They're doing that because there is no job and no money, and sometimes no sustenance here. So that's why they're moving back. What's important is for them to connect back to the livelihoods that they have lost, right, through the process. And that is where government coming in and giving push to agriculture, and we spoke about local livelihood crafts and so on. Those are the ways in which they can create sustenance for themselves in the space that they are in. And first comes sustenance and then comes sustainable development, and they go hand in hand, right? Because if that sustenance doesn't happen, they will migrate back to the city. So reverse migration could be re-reversed if there is no livelihood and local crafts, and there's no system to take advantage of that, or rather explore that further. Also, how we can catalyze this process. I mean, maybe Rama and Farah can touch a bit. There are few projects that we do in rural areas where we reach out to the rural community and through education and livelihoods. But these are just starting. This is a direction we are starting to take. So we need to learn more, and we need to go a little deeper ourselves at Bhoomi before we sort of do it at scale.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are projects still at very nascent stages, whether it's our farm in Mumlapuram and our project in Tiruvannamalai, where we are, the intent is to work with, fostering that, that the whole, what do you call, the notions of living sustainably within your own bioregion, enabling livelihood options. But we are still at very nascent stages. And also what I'd like to state is we are primarily an educational institution. So our objective is really to, create the multiplier effect through fellows taking their journeys forward. So we are not really into the space of catalyzing movements, though we are trying in our own small ways. Yeah. But it's too early to talk about those projects.
I think just a couple of announcements from my end before we end the webinar. I think just want to let everybody know that if they're interested in attending more webinars, and soon Bhoomi, we're kind of encouraged by the response that we've got for some of these webinars, and we will be offering entire modules online. So if anyone is interested, and if you is interested, please just drop your mail ID with me, and we can add you to the list and keep you updated about all our offerings, online offerings. If you would definitely, if you're interested in education and want to go more deeply into understanding education, we offer the 10-month fellowship in holistic education. You can know more about that on our website, bhoomicollege.org. And we have a couple of webinars coming up, one on 23rd, which gives you an insight into what learning looks like at Bhoomi College. Bhoomi Fellows will be talking about the real life projects that they do as part of their fellowship. And then on 27th, we have a very interesting webinar, which I think a lot of young people would be interested in. It's on green careers. So what exactly are the options once you get into the alternative, quote unquote. So that would be an interesting webinar to attend. So yeah, just drop in your mail IDs if you would like to be part of our mailing list and receive updates on the same, or just follow our social media pages, Facebook and Instagram, just Bhoomi College. All right, Rama, Aunindo, I'll let you guys end the webinar.
Yeah. So,
Rama, I think we don't have time for playing the video.
okay.
I would urge the people, who are still in the call to look at this movie called Schooling the World. Maybe because we're already over time, maybe just a few,
Feeling words?
responses, feeling words.
Yeah.
From people. You can unmute yourself, talk, or just type
Chat. Yeah.
in chat.
Yeah, the floor is open, so
Share.
people can share their one phrase, one word feelings. Maybe Anindo or Rama, you set the ball rolling, and maybe others will join in.
It's already started.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Are there more coming in?
I personally felt quite encouraged by people coming in and the participation in terms of questions and comments.
Yeah, I felt that it was a nice space that we co-held together, and it is hopefully given all of us some more food for thought and reflection. And from my experience, I feel all those thoughts and questions lead us into action also if we persist with them. So I'm also feeling connected to many people through this medium.
Yeah, definitely encouraged by the response, just the number of people joining in. I think so. It kind of signifies that there is a churning to really rethink some of the things that are happening in our life, economy, education, and the real big things that generally we kind of outsource to specialists and say, you know what, let somebody else think of changing the economy, let somebody else think of changing the environment, let
It's
someone
not
else think
mine.
of it. So the outsourcing looks to have, I think, stopped in some of us. So I think that's a great sign that a lot of people are wondering, is this really how education needs to be? And this really can't be an issue that we can holistically cover in one
Absolutely.
webinar.
It is,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely
Tall
requires
order.
requires a module, requires a longer engagement, sometimes even face to face. But I think it's a good start. So anyone who's interested to deep dive into this particular subject can be connected to Bhoomi, or there are other initiatives across the country as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of choices. Hope
Yes.
people use that. All right, I think we're good, and thank
Thank
you
you, everyone.
everyone. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Bhoomi Fellows, for joining in. Thank you, Anindo, Rama. That was interesting. So see you guys. Okay, I think that was also a thumbs up from the vocal cord.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we'll take it. And yeah, hopefully see a lot of you on Saturday at the
Yeah.
same time, 3 p.m. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.